That footage ended up going to 50 Cent and his production company, and it's kind of the centerpiece.
Sold to them.
Yes, was the centerpiece of the documentary. So watch this particular scene, because this is where a lot of people feel Diddy really screwed over someone that he should be very, very thankful.
Stop what you're doing, because this isn't rap beef. This isn't ego. This isn't he said, she said. This is the kind of allegation that makes record labels sweat and lawyers stop answering calls. Because 50 Cent didn't just throw shade this time, he threw a nuclear accusation straight into the middle of hip-hop royalty. And the name attached. Yeah. Jay-Z. According to 50, this wasn't about competition. This wasn't about creative differences. This was about stopping something from coming out at any cost. A documentary so dangerous, so explosive that powerful forces allegedly wanted it buried before the public ever saw it. And when 50 Cent talks about people trying to silence him, history tells us one thing: he doesn't scare easy and he doesn't speak softly. The internet froze. Blogs scrambled. Group chats lit up like emergency sirens. Because if even half of what's being implied is true, this makes the Kardashians look like a book club argument. So stay right here. Because once you hear where this accusation came from, why fans say this crossed from beef into something darker, and how the industry is reacting in real time, you'll realize this isn't just ugly. This didn't begin with a diss record. It didn't start with a subtweet. It didn't even kick off with a viral clip. It started the way the most uncomfortable stories always do, quietly. Behind industry smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. For months, there were whispers that 50 Cent was cooking up something different. Not a rollout. Not a troll. Not a power move designed for laughs. This was a documentary one that, insiders said, wasn't built to entertain but to expose. The kind of project that makes rooms go silent and calendars suddenly fill up. At first, it felt like standard industry nerves. Executives get nervous. Lawyers get twitchy. That's normal. But then the tone changed. The jokes got sharper. The captions got more pointed. And the phrases coming out of 50's mouth stopped sounding playful and started sounding deliberate. They don't want this out. That line landed like a warning shot, because when 50 talks about resistance, fans don't assume contracts fell apart. They assume someone felt threatened. This is a man who made a career out of staring pressure in the face and asking it to blink first.
If he says a project hit a wall,
people ask why and who built it. Then a name surfaced that made the air heavier. J-Z. Not framed as a rival. Not positioned as a competitor. But implied as a force, someone with enough gravity in the room to make doors close quietly and decisions happen without signatures. The implication wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of suggestion that makes headlines tiptoe and blog posts triple check adjectives. Here's where things got uncomfortable. 50 didn't say people disagreed with the documentary. He didn't say distribution got tricky.
he didn't say the budget collapsed, he implied the project
was viewed as too dangerous to exist. And that's when the joke stopped, because documentaries don't scare powerful people unless they touch something real: reputation, legacy, control of the narrative. The stuff money can't buy back once it's gone. When someone hints that a film needed to be buried, fans start asking what it contained, and why silence suddenly felt so valuable. The internet split fast. One camp said this was classic 50 provocation as performance, controversy as currency. They argued he knows how to light a fuse and walk away smiling while the room explodes. In their view, this was strategy: dominate the cycle, own the conversation, keep the spotlight exactly where he wants it. The other camp said no, this felt different. The tone wasn't jokey. The delivery wasn't smug. The implication wasn't playful. It sounded like someone who'd pushed a project forward, felt real resistance, and decided to talk around it instead of staying quiet. Less look at me and more pay attention. And then came the phrase that made everything feel colder. Not that the documentary was blocked, but that it was allegedly stopped. That word carries weight. Blocked implies paperwork. Stopped implies power. Fans started connecting dots they hadn't bothered to line up before. Years of parallel empires. Two moguls who rarely crossed paths publicly, who never quite aligned, who built power in opposite ways. One loud, confrontational, and allergic to intimidation. The other quiet, surgical, and synonymous with control of the boardroom. Two kings. Two blueprints. One narrative now colliding. Suddenly, old moments got re-examined. Past comments replayed with fresh ears. Interviews that once felt unrelated now sounded adjacent. The idea wasn't that they were enemies, it was that they occupied the same airspace and preferred it uncontested. That's when the blogs got cautious. Headlines leaned on words like alleges, suggests, and
Claims.
nobody wanted to overstep. Because when allegations brush up against power at this level, every syllable matters. Nobody wants to be the outlet that said too much or the one that missed something big and 50. He didn't rush to clarify. He let the implication breathe. That silence did more damage than any rant could have. Because when someone with his history lets a statement hang, it invites speculation, and speculation is gasoline. Fans argued whether this was about artistic freedom or ego, about truth or territory, about a documentary, or about who gets to decide what stories are allowed to exist. The mood online shifted from entertained to uneasy. Hip-hop beef is fun. Allegations of suppression are not. The conversation stopped being about personalities and started being about power dynamics, about how narratives get shaped, about who controls the record of history, about what happens when someone refuses to play nice and insists on
Telling a story anyway, and right.
There, at that intersection of implication and silence, the scandal crossed a threshold. This wasn't ugly because of insults. It was ugly because of what it suggested. If a documentary can be made too dangerous, what does that say about the system it threatens? And if a legend implies another legend had the reach to make that happen, what does that say about how power really works behind the curtain? By the end of this stretch, the audience wasn't asking whether 50 was exaggerating. They were asking what the documentary contained. And that question, once asked, doesn't go away quietly. Because if this was the opening move, the next phase wouldn't be whispers. It would be reactions, defenses, meme warfare, and a public trying to decode which parts were strategy and which parts were a warning. That's how you know something hit a nerve. Not laughter. Not shock memes. A pause. The kind where people reread the same sentence twice because it feels heavier the second time. When 50 Cent implied his documentary was treated like contraband, the internet didn't ask if it was messy, it asked who felt threatened. And then the memes arrived, not the jokey kind. The forensic kind, screenshots with timestamps. Old interviews clipped next to new statements. Captions that didn't punch down, they pointed up. People weren't laughing. They were connecting dots like a conspiracy board made of Wi-Fi and caffeine. When humor showed up, it was the gallows variety. This isn't beef, it's bookkeeping. When the truth needs security clearance. The tone had changed, because hip-hop fans know the difference between trolling and testimony. And this didn't sound like a punchline. It sounded like someone testing how much air the room would give him before it snapped shut. That's when Jay-Z's silence became the loudest sound in the building. No rebuttal. No denial, no slick quote to ice the chatter. In this game, silence can mean 1,000 things. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's dignity. Sometimes it's lawyers saying, do not type. But when an allegation lands this big, silence becomes a Rorschach test. Everyone sees what they already believe. Supporters said the quiet was class. Power doesn't argue with noise. Kings don't clap back. Let the storm pass. Skeptics said the opposite. When something smells this serious, a vacuum invites suspicion. And suspicion, once invited, redecorates the whole house. Meanwhile, the industry started acting. Careful. Not statements distance. Podcast staged. Hosts added disclaimers before mentioning names. Outlets leaned hard on words like alleges and claims, italicizing responsibility into the margins. The phrasing wasn't about accuracy alone. It was about risk management. Nobody wanted to be the platform that turned a spark into a subpoena, and then the celebrity reaction subtle, surgical, telling. No names. Just vibes. A raised eyebrow emoji here. Ah, that's wild there. A post about creative freedom that somehow landed like a thesis footnote. People noticed. Who didn't react to because absence can be a message. When certain voices go quiet at the same time, the internet assumes a memo went out even. If idea in single quotes the conversation evolved again. It wasn't about whether the allegation was true. It was about why the allegation sounded plausible to so many people at once. That's the danger zone, because plausibility is born from history, from patterns, from the way power has moved in the past. Fans started revisiting how documentaries get greenlit or quietly iced. How distribution doors open for some stories and never quite align for others. How narratives that challenge legacies often stall in development hell. Suddenly, the phrase "too dangerous to exist" stopped sounding theatrical and started sounding procedural and 50. He didn't over-explain. He let the tension cook. Every time he posted something unrelated, it read like punctuation. Every silence felt intentional. The man has made a career out of understanding timing. If he wanted to walk it back, he could have. If he wanted to clarify, he would have. Instead, he let the industry sweat. Instead, he let the industry sweat. Fans split into camps that didn't speak to each other. One camp said this was masterful chess. Control the narrative, keep the spotlight, force the conversation onto terrain where silence looks suspicious. In that reading, the allegation was a level pullet. Watch the machine war. The other camp said this was something else entirely. A warning shot dressed as commentary. Not "look at me," but "look over there, now ask why." The public outrage followed a different rhythm than usual. It wasn't loud. It was dense. Threads went long. Videos got analytical. People weren't dunking. They were hypothesizing. When outrage turns academic, it's because folks sense consequences. And then the wildcard industry paranoia, producers whispered. Creators DM'd each other. The question wasn't, is this true? It was, if this is even half true, what does it mean for everyone else? Because if one documentary can be smothered for touching the wrong nerve, what happens to smaller voices without armor? That's when the phrase "control of narrative" took over the discourse. Not censorship. Not suppression. Control. Who gets to tell the story of an era? Who curates the footnotes? Who decides which chapters get glossy covers and which ones get misplaced? In a drawer labeled "later." The internet doesn't forgive easily when it smells gatekeeping and Jay-Z's camp staying silent again. Not proof of anything kept the oxygen flowing. Silence is neutral in theory. In practice, it's interpretive art. Everyone projects their politics onto it. By now, the documentary itself had become a mythic object. People imagined what it contained. Names, timelines, receipts. The absence of details only sharpened the blade. When specifics don't exist, speculation fills the gap with everything it fears most, and the memes adapted. They stopped being jokes and became shorthand. One image, one caption, 1,000 implications. This is why they don't want it out. This is why it never premiered. The humor was doing the work of rumor-efficient, sticky, hard to correct. The industry's posture told its own story. Not panic prudence. The kind that shows up when you don't know which way the wind will blow, but you. Remember how hard it can hit. By the end of this phase? One thing was undeniable. The allegation had escaped the realm of personality and entered the realm of structure. This wasn't about two men. It was about systems. About how stories move or don't. And that's when people realized the ugliest part wasn't the accusation itself. It was the possibility that it made sense. Because if it made sense, even hypothetically, then the next question wasn't about 50 or Jay-Z. That's the dangerous phase. After the hashtag's cool and the takes stop racing. When a story hardens into perception. And with this one, perception shifted in a way nobody could reverse with a tweet or a press quote. For 50 Cent, the allegation didn't boomerang the way critics predicted. It didn't collapse under its own weight. It didn't get laughed off as theatrics. Instead, it changed how people listened to him. Not as a provocateur throwing sparks for attention, but as someone implying he touched a nerve powerful enough to flinch. That distinction mattered, because when an artist known for bravado suggests resistance that feels structural, the audience doesn't ask whether he's exaggerating. They ask whether he's experienced pushback before, and what survived long enough to teach him which words to choose. On the other side of the equation, Jay-Z remained silent. No denials. No clarifications. No elegant dismissal. Just distance. And in moments like this, distance becomes a canvas. Everyone paints their own meaning onto it. Supporters read restraint. Critics read calculation. Observers read lawyers. None of those readings can be proven, and that's the point. Silence doesn't close the door. It leaves it ajar. And an open door invites stories to walk in uninvited. What changed most wasn't the temperature of the feud. It was the frame. This stopped being about personalities and became about power optics. About who gets to shape history. About which narratives glide through distribution pipelines and which ones stall in polite limbo. The allegation didn't need receipts to do damage. It only needed plausibility. And the industry's reaction measured, cautious, careful made plausibility. Feel uncomfortably reasonable. That's when the conversation turned inward. Fans began questioning. How many stories never see daylight? How many documentaries die quietly because they unsettle a legacy, complicate a brand, or disrupt a timeline that powerful interests prefer smooth? The idea that a project could be labeled too dangerous wasn't mocked anymore, it was interrogated because everyone's seen it before. Projects delayed indefinitely. Distribution complications? Creative differences that never resolved. This moment just put a spotlight on it. For 50. The consequence wasn't isolation, it was gravity. His words started carrying extra weight. Every future tease about truth or exposure would be heard differently. The room would lean in, not because they trust him blindly, but because they now believe he knows where the pressure points are. That's a risky position. Gravity pulls attention, but it also pulls scrutiny. For Jay-Z, the consequence wasn't condemnation, it was heightened expectation. Silence, once chosen, becomes a posture you're judged by. Every move gets read against the quiet. Every project gets scanned for intent. The absence of response doesn't end speculation. It teaches the audience to listen for patterns. Instead of statements, and patterns are louder than quotes, the industry adjusted without announcing it. You could feel it in the language people used, the hedges they placed. The way conversations pivoted away from specifics and toward abstractions like creative freedom and narrative ownership. When vocabulary shifts like that, it's because everyone senses the ground moved. No one wanted to be caught on the wrong side of history, or on the wrong side of a gate. The ugliest part of this wasn't the allegation. It was the realization that the allegation fit a broader story. Many already believed. And belief is sticky. This didn't end with a smoking gun. There was no document leak, no dramatic reveal. It ended with a pause, the kind that makes people watch the next move closely. Because when something imprints like this, it doesn't demand answers immediately. It waits for corroboration, for coincidence, for the next project that quietly doesn't happen. That's how narratives shift in real life, not with fireworks, but with accumulation. The reputational math changed on both sides. Not catastrophically, subtly. The kind of change that alters interviews, negotiations, and how much benefit of the doubt remains in the bank. This wasn't a career ender. It was a trust-adjuster. And trust, once adjusted, never returns to factory settings. The audience didn't leave angry. They left alert. Alert to the possibility that power doesn't always need to shout to stop something. Alert to the idea that culture's memory is curated as much as it is created. Alert to the fact that sometimes the most revealing stories are the ones that don't get told. Because someone decided they shouldn't exist. Alright, don't act neutral now. If you made it this far, you've already picked a side in your head. So let's talk. Drop a comment and say it with your chest. Was this classic 50 Cent chaos? Or did he pull the curtain back on something the industry really doesn't want discussed? Did Jay-Z's silence read like confidence or like a strategic pause? And be honest, how many documentaries, stories, and truths do you think never see daylight because someone powerful decides they shouldn't? No fence sitting. This is hip-hop history we're talking about. Smash that like button like it owes you money, interest, and back pay for every story that never made it to the screen. Hit subscribe like you're locking in access to the real conversations, because these industry moments don't come with press releases, They come with patterns. Turn on notifications so you're never late when another harmless comment turns into a cultural earthquake. This channel doesn't chase rumors, we map trajectories. We don't fall for surface drama, we follow power. And we don't wait for permission to ask the uncomfortable questions. Scandals drop constantly here. Narratives get rewritten quietly. And the loudest moves are usually the ones nobody explains. So stay locked in. Stay skeptical. Stay ahead of the spin. Because when legends clash, silence speaks, and a documentary becomes too dangerous to exist. Fame Blueprint is right here, breaking down how power moves, who controls the narrative, and why some truths never make it past the planning stage.